Hey guys, what's happening? Dan Smith, Corrective Training here. We are back for another edition of Courtyard Mobility. I got my trusty friend, the Ladle, here today, and we are going to be talking about creating space for your hip joints. Alright? So, if I use this ladle, we can imagine this as the femur bone, okay? This being the head, and obviously your femur. Alright, so I'm just going to use my hand as an example of the socket. So we have the ball and we have the socket, okay? So, what happens is sometimes when we put our hips through a heavy workload or we're doing a lot of work where we're sitting, driving, often this head of the femur can get stuck in this hip joint and it can actually translate a little bit forward and get stuck in that kind of socket position, so that when we try and rotate that leg, we can create a little bit of pinching in the front of the hip, okay? Just being that that joint gets quite jammed up into that socket, and then when we are trying to rotate, we can feel some pinching and can get caught. So what we need to try to do is find a solution in which we can relieve some of that pressure of that joint and that feeling of almost being jammed up, okay? We can try to loosen it up and try and free that joint to move a little bit easier, okay? So this is where we will create, or where we bring in a solution for using these bands, okay? We're gonna be doing some banded distractions, all right? I've got 3 distractions that I'm gonna show you today. One being a lateral distraction, where we are trying to pull out, or we're trying to take the head of the femur and just kind of pull it out of that socket a little bit. Not literally, you're not looking to dislocate, it's just a gentle kind of distraction force, okay? We've got a posterior distraction, and then we've also got a longitudinal distraction. All of those are just looking to create some breathing space between the head of the femur and the joint or the socket of the hip, okay? So what we're going to do, we'll start off just with a lateral distraction. I've got a very light band here. Guys, the only reason I'm using this light band is I don't want to rip the gate off my front of the door, okay? I would recommend using a little bit of a heavier band, so probably a 42 millimeter band, or I think they normally come in the green color, all right? Just because that will allow a little bit more kind of tension compared to something as light. So again, I'm only using this so I don't rip off the gate from my house. All right, so what we're gonna do, we'll tie this in here. All right, so just make a little loop there. Then what I'm looking to do is step into that, bring this all the way up to the top of my hip, okay? I'm then getting into this position here. So already this band wants to pull me towards the gate. From here, what I can do, we'll start off with our lateral distraction. So I can bring my one leg up, okay? And I can just hang out in this position. And what it's doing is it's just trying to pull that head of the femur and just try and pull it outwards, okay? So I can hang out here for about a minute or so. Next up, what I can do is come back on my knees. Okay, I quite like this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cross this knee and I'm going to bring it a little bit over to the left, and then I'm just going to look to just sit. I'm going to lean this way. Creates a bit of a stretch on those muscles, but also this band is just helping just to pull a little bit and distract that joint. Okay? So again, what I do from here, I just bring this over a little bit to the left and I just lean into it. You can also do this with 2 legs, where you're just kind of leaning into that a little bit. Okay. So, number 1, lateral deviation. For you guys who are quite familiar with this stuff, these are very, very basic distractions, but the point of today is just to get out to those who are not familiar with banded distractions and who could use some opening up of those hips. So next one, we're going to do a posterior distraction. Okay, so what I do, get yourself a roller or anything that can elevate your foot a little bit. I'm going to loop it around my heel or back of my calf, and then I'm going to cross it over. It's almost like a figure of 8, and then all I will do here is just pull myself back. Okay, and I can just lie back on my elbows, and what it's doing, it's just pulling my leg out. Slash longitudinally. Okay, again, a heavier band is needed here. You can lie back flat, you can be like so, and just relax here. Okay? again, we're going to hang out there for about a minute or so. Longitudinal distraction also helps with some knee pain. Okay, last up, we're going to do a posterior distraction. So we are looking to pull the head of the femur into the back of the socket. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm actually going to bring this band a little bit higher for this posterior distraction. Okay, so I'll wedge it in about here. Alright, I'll loop it. What I'm going to do there is bring it up into the top of my groin area. Alright, and because I'm naturally quite flexible, I'm just going to try and hang out just over here. Okay, nice and straight, a little bit of a stretch on the hamstrings, and I'm just looking just to pull this back. Alright, if you cannot get your hands to the floor quite easily, you're more than welcome just to get a chair or something and just rest your hands on that chair and just let this pull backwards. Okay, so try and keep these legs nice and straight. You can have your hands on a chair, and that is just naturally going to pull that joint, or pull the head of that femur to the back of the joint. Okay, so that's a simple posterior distraction. So again, a little recap: we've got lateral distraction where we're pulling to the side. We've got the longitudinal where we're trying to pull down and out, and then we've got the posterior distraction where we're pulling to the back of the joint. All right. Depending on where you're feeling your pain, I would recommend just trying 3 of those and then retest. Okay, so if you had pain and discomfort when performing hip flexion, try these 3 distractions and then try it again. Test, retest. So in the beginning, we test, quite sore, we perform the distractions, and then we retest. All right, and depending on how your improvement is will kind of determine how many times you need to go through this. Maybe you need to do a little bit of rolling into the glute, into the hip flexors, into the side. It's all just going to depend. All right, so do a little bit of rolling, test, perform your distractions, retest, kind of maybe try another technique, do these again, retest until you feel like you've made an improvement. All right, guys, that's it for today. Courtyard Mobility will be back later this week with some more info. All right, see you there.